Hello, mathematicians. Today we're going to be learning about decimals, more specifically about ordering decimals. To get us started, here we have an example where we have 1 and 2 tenths, we have 4 tenths, 25 hundredths, and 1 and 19 hundredths. Now, before we begin, we're going to line up all of our numbers using their place value. And once we do that, you'll notice that all our decimal points will also line up. So that's another way to do it if you just want to use that as a reference. And so here we have our ones place value. Here we have our tenths place value. And here we have our hundredths place value. But notice here that some values don't have a digit in the hundredths place value. So we're just going to add zeros as place value holders. You don't have to do this, but it does make it easier to compare our numbers. Now, we have 4 numbers here, and we want to order them in order from least to greatest. So, we're going to take a look at our ones place value. Notice that in our ones place value, we have a 1, 0, 0, and a 1. So we're going to be looking at the 2 numbers in the middle because one of those would be our smallest number, because they're both leading with a 0. So we're going to look at the tenths place, and the first number that's leading with a 0 has a 4, and the second number that's leading with a 0 has a 2. So 25 hundredths is going to be your smallest number. So if we're going to order it in order from least to greatest, 25 hundredths is going to come first. Now we only have one other number that's leading with a 0. So that automatically makes 4 tenths our second smallest number. So we have 25 hundredths and then 4 tenths. And then now we're going to look at the numbers that are leading with a 1. So we have 1 and 2 tenths and 1 and 19 hundredths. Now both of them in the ones place have a 1, so we have to look at the tenths place. So in the tenths place, this one has a 2, but the one on the bottom has a 1, making the one on the bottom smaller. So the next number would be 1 and 19 hundredths. And then finally, we have 1 and 2 tenths. So if we took those numbers and ordered them from least to greatest, this is what it would look like. So here we have another example. And here we have 5 and 3 tenths. We have 2 tenths. We have 5 and 15 hundredths, and we have 5 and 1 tenth. So we're going to line them up by place value. So the decimal points automatically get lined up once we do that. And then we're going to label. So we have our ones place value, we have our tenths place value, and then we have our hundredths place value. But notice that not all values have a number in the hundredths place value, so we're going to add zeros as place value holders because these zeros do not change the value of these numbers. And now in order to write these numbers in order from least to greatest, we're going to start off and look at our ones place. And in our ones place, we have a 5, a 0, a 5, and a 5. So that automatically makes 2 tenths the smallest number, because it's leading with a 0 while all the other numbers are leading with a 5. So when we write our list in order from least to greatest, 2 tenths is going to be the first one. All right, and now we know that all 3 of our other numbers are leading with a 5 in the ones place value, so we have to look at the tenths place value in order to find the next number. So in our tenths place value, for the numbers leading with a 5, we have a 3, we have a 1, and we have a 1. So that automatically makes one of the 2 bottom numbers the smallest one because they both start off with a 5, a decimal point, and a 1. And now let's look at the hundredths place to see which number on the bottom is the smallest. So we have a 5 and we have a 0. So that automatically makes 5 and 1 tenth the next number, okay? And so we're going to look at 5 and 3 tenths and 5 and 15 hundredths. Now in the tenths place, 5 and 3 tenths has a 3, and 5 and 1500ths has a 1. So our next number is going to be 5 and 1500ths. And then our final number is going to be 5 and 3/10. So that's how we take those numbers and write them in order from least to greatest. So here we have another example. We have 8/10, we have 800ths, we have 2 and 4500ths, and we have 173 thousandths. So we're going to line them up by place value, and that automatically makes the decimal points lined up. So here we have our ones place, our tenths place, our hundreds place, and notice how 8/10 doesn't have a digit in the hundreds place, so we're just going to put a 0 there as a place value holder to ensure that all numbers have the same number of digits after the decimal point. Then we have our thousands place value, and 173 thousandths is the only number that has a digit in the thousands place, so we're going to add zeros as place value holders. Then we're going to look at the ones place. We have 0, 0, 2, 0. So that automatically makes 2 and 4500ths the biggest number because it's the only one that's leading with a 2, while all the other numbers are leading with a 0. All right? So we're going to look at the tenths place value for only the numbers that are leading with a 0. So we have 8, 0, and 1. So between 8, 0, and 1, 0 is the smallest number. So when we write our numbers in order from least to greatest, that makes 800ths our smallest number. Now, we're only going to be looking at the two numbers that are left over that are leading with a 0, which is 8/10 and 173 thousandths. Now, looking at the tenths place value, 8/10 has an 8 and 173 thousandths has a 1, making 173 thousandths the next number. Okay? And then we have 8/10 because it's the last number that's leading with a 0. And then finally, we have 2 and 4500ths since that's our biggest number. All right, so here we have our final example. And we have 3 and 5800ths. We have 3 and 8/10. We have 3 and 582 thousandths. And we have 3 and 5/10. So we're going to line them up by place value, which automatically makes our decimal points line up, and label our place value. So here we have the ones, the tenths, the hundreds. Notice that not all our values have a number in the hundreds place value, so we're going to add zeros as place value holders. And then we have our thousands place value, and not all of our values have a number there, so we're going to add zeros as place value holders. So, starting off, if we look at the ones place, we have 3, 3, 3, and 3. So we cannot use the ones place to compare. Now, if we look at the tens place, we have 5, 8, 5, and 5. So we're going to compare the numbers that have a 5 in the tens place and look at their hundreds place value, which we have an 8, and a 0. So that automatically makes 3 and 5/10 the smallest because it has a 0 in the hundreds place value. So if we're ordering our number from least to greatest, we have 3 and 5/10. Then we're going to look at the two values that start off with 3.58. Now our first one in the thousands place value has a 0. But then we have 3.582, which in the thousands place value has a 2, making that bigger because 2 is bigger than 0. So our next number is going to be 3 and 5800ths. And then we're going to have 3 and 582 thousandths. And then finally, we have 3 and 8/10. And this one's bigger because the number in the tens place value is automatically bigger than the other three values in their tens place value. So that's it for ordering decimals.